Hello and welcome to this very special edition of CNY Haunts. Today we've got a Christmas-themed episode where we're talking about Dickens in the Scrooge movies and how those ghosts and those interactions can be interpreted. We're joined today by Dr. Sarah Moulton. She is the Associate Dean of Arts at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as well as from the Dickens Society. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
First of all, I kind of introduced you a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit about your background and about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I was born not far from, I think, where you are in St. Catharines, Ontario, and did spend some time on the west coast of Canada growing up, but then returned to Ontario to study, and I did my PhD at the University of Toronto, and also had a great time on a postdoc at Cornell, I think also not far from you. And so it was during my doctoral studies, and then I continued in my postdoc where Victorian literature became the focus of my studies and the work that I was doing, the writing that I was doing. And then about 2012, I think it's 13, 14 years ago coming up, I went to the first time I went to the Dickens Society symposium, which was held in Canterbury, in England, in Kent, not far from one of Dickens' homes, actually, and near the region that influenced a lot of his writing. And it was there that I got more involved with the society, that Dickens became yet more important to my own work as a teacher and a scholar. And from there, my involvement with the society just continued. So we're going to talk about A Christmas Carol today, which is a work that I regularly teach, and that is really quite dear to my heart.
Now, a lot of people, when they hear, about the Christmas Carol movies, Scrooge movies, or the writings from Dickens, we associate with the holidays. Do you think that that's what Dickens meant for it to be, is like a holiday writing, or is that something we've kind
Absolutely.
of just grown into ourselves?
No, absolutely. So, ironically, this is the anniversary today, when we're talking here, December 19th, is the anniversary of the publication of A Christmas Carol. It was published in 1843 expressly for Christmas. And Dickens would annually produce a Christmas story for his readers. But this is the one that most greatly captured the Victorian imagination, sold out its first print run within just a few days, and it has stayed with us ever since. But yes, so the short answer is wrote expressly for Christmas.
Now, my brother loves A Christmas Carol. I'm told he has like every possible version that you
Yeah.
can have on video. Do you think the different kinds of movies that have come out over the years, the writings, the stories, do you think it's changed from when Dickens first introduced it, or is the story kind of stayed pretty much the same?
I think both responses to that question are true. I think that often, like Dickens' initial um, piece of writing, like A Christmas Carol in its first form, the story has a lot to do with Dickens' own age and kind of captures both the problems and the spirit of the age in which he's living. And so I think that over time, since its first publication, as different adaptations, especially films, come out, they do that again. They kind of reproduce or they capture the essence of the spirit of the work initially, but also respond to social concerns in their own day. And that's whether or not it's a kind of modern adaptation or one that seems to be retelling the story by situating it in the Victorian period.
Now, during that time period, were ghost stories very common? Were they unique? And did people consider them frightening or comforting? Like, what kind of was the feel back then when he would have written this?
Yeah, so the tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas time predates Dickens, and comes out of English folklore, and was something that people did. They would tell ghost stories at Christmas. I think Christmas marking a time of birth, but also a time when people reflect, look back, and are very conscious of the passing of time and the entrance into a new year. So ghost stories being told at Christmas, that was common, but Dickens kind of took it a step further and took the Christmas ghost story out of the purely Gothic realm and carefully structured, as we know, the story by having the three different ghosts or spirits and moved us out of the purely haunting realm into finally, by the story's conclusion, the kind of celebratory communal realm. And that was a key difference.
Now, you watch a Christmas story, or you read the story itself. The ghosts are a little bit different than modern day scary
Yeah.
movie ghosts, right? What makes Dickens' ghosts different and so unique?
I think it's because they're out to do more than scare him, and or give an audience a thrill. They're there to kind of hopefully enact a kind of conversion of heart in him. They have a strategic purpose. They want to show him things in order to change his frame of mind, again to convert his heart. And so there is the kind of intentionality about these spirits. It's different than a usual kind of ghost or horror story.
Something I saw when I was kind of looking up this story and some people's beliefs. Do you think Dickens meant the ghost to be taken as like actual supernatural type beings, or more of like a subconscious of Scrooge himself?
I think it's both. I think he can capitalize on the ghost story as a genre, and the way that people get a thrill out of that, and so it's engaging for the reader. But certainly, the whole matter of guilt is there in Scrooge, and that the spirits have a way of drumming up about the past, but also worry about the future, etc. That suggests that there's more than just a scare tactic going on here, and that they could well be a kind of manifestation of Scrooge's unconscious, but also that of the whole society really. And Dickens is interested, I think, in not just kind of stirring up the heart of one individual, of Ebenezer Scrooge, but of course the Scrooge in all of us.
Let's talk about Jacob Marley.
Yeah.
When he shows up, he's got the chains, he's got the ledger. Like as a kid, yeah, that was kind of creepy to me.
Oh
What do
yeah,
you
I
think? What do you
believe
think the
it.
symbolism? What do you think the symbolism is for the chains, for the ledgers with Jacob Marley?
Well, I was talking about guilt there a moment ago, and this is really what Marley shows us and Scrooge, that he wears the chains he forged in life, he says, and so he's carrying with him the burden of his own heart, of his guilt about his greed, of his kind of singular focus on money making, on self interest. On a lack of concern for anyone except himself. And so he is plagued now and forced to carry these chains and the ledgers, everything that preoccupied him to too great a degree in life. Now he's burdened with in death. And I would also say that there's some interesting exchanges between he and Scrooge where he really emphasizes his invisibility. And so part of his punishment, in a way, seems to be this a kind of having to have the experience of, say, the poor, the working classes, the downtrodden, even children in Victorian society, who are by and large, at least as far as Dickens is concerned, invisible. And so that is part of Marley's fate now as well. He says that he sat by Scrooge often, but was never recognized. And so now he's become a kind of monstrous embodiment of the worst of society's ills.
What would you think is the most important lesson Marley is trying to teach Scrooge? Is it what you kind of just explained, or is it more like, hey, there's a warning of what else you're going to expect here tonight?
I think it's both of those things. I think, if you don't change your ways, look at what could happen to you. But it's also the beginning. Marley was Scrooge's partner, and it does represent a kind of beginning for Scrooge, a beginning or a sort of possibility of transformation, because he's presented, although he kind of, he has his nephew, but he dismisses that relationship, and he thwarted his own engagement to the woman he loved. Marley then is kind of was closest in a way to Scrooge, and someone with whom he could best identify. So it makes sense that he is kind of the starting point if there's going to be a possibility of change, for change in Scrooge.
Now, all of us, I think it's fair to say, look back at our lives, and there's things that we would do differently. With
Isn't that
Scrooge, who is Scrooge, the ghost of Christmas past, why are these memories so painful for him?
It's such a good question. I think this what comes up, and this is so in this respect and others, but the psychology of the text is really quite, I think, modern in many ways, in ways that we can understand. So everything that Scrooge has kind of, in a sense, locked away, in a safe, underneath piles of ledgers and so on, all his own pain, his loneliness as a child. We see him isolated in the schoolroom, and it is that moment when he's shown little Scrooge himself that he's brought to tears. He weeps for that child. So those things become so important in his transformation. It really is a process, in his getting to know himself. And by doing that, then there is the possibility of change. But he has to confront the past.
What do you think the Ghost of Christmas Past is meant to represent overall? Is it more regret, trauma, or something else maybe?
I think it is that loneliness, that isolation, the importance of childhood. It's such an important issue for Dickens, who was very concerned about the conditions children, especially those who were forced to work, had to face. Um, and so I think that the child, again, is a useful place to start because it's such a poignant issue for Dickens socially, but also for himself and for the misfortunes that he experienced as a child as well. So I think that if we can look again at the most vulnerable in society and find some affinity there, as Scrooge does in looking at his little self, then again there is possibility.
Let's move on to the Ghost of Christmas Present. Now, this one, some may consider the friendliest, but he's also very, very honest with Scrooge. What do you think Dickens is trying to represent here?
Again, we're back to children, and this is interesting because this is a moment that we often don't see in film adaptations of A Christmas Carol. The moment when we see those two ragged children, one representing ignorance, one representing want. And for Dickens, those two social ills breed, or have the potential to breed the most destruction in society. So there is a strange tension between that affable ghost of Christmas presents, but that affability, that kind of joy, conceals all manner of sins. And I think that this is this is what really gets to Dickens, is a kind of social hypocrisy. We conceal what's really going on behind the scenes, and what is kind of holding up uh, the wealth and the power and the luxury and so on that certain classes may experience, but others, of course, do not.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. I don't know if it's more associated with the Ghost of Christmas Present or the story overall, but I read Dickens kind of had, was going through poverty as a child. Do you think that may have played a little bit into his writings here?
Oh, absolutely. Probably informed almost everything on some level, everything that he wrote. I would say. So when he was a child of about 12, his father fell into debt, was imprisoned for debt. I often tell my students we ought to remember that we no longer live in an age of debtor's prison because so many of us might otherwise be there. But Dickens and his family were forced to confront that. And so Dickens then was sent to work in a blacking factory as a child, and so confronted some of the very things that he's describing and goes on to describe in so many of his writings.
Let's move on now to the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, the Ghost of the Future. Now, this one to me, the chains scared me a little bit with Marley, but
Yes,
this one, the not talking really
the
gets me, right?
silence.
Because
Yeah,
you're like what is he trying to portray here? What do you
yeah.
think was Dickens' motivation in having this spirit be silent?
I think it produces that bone chilling effect that you're talking about, and death is silent, right? In the end, we will all be silenced. This is the fate that awaits us all. It makes things, for the reader, for Scrooge, darker, more ambiguous. You cannot finally kind of pin this spirit down. You cannot enter into dialogue or connection with the spirit. It's only sort of out there, and you are powerless against it. And so I think that the silence speaks to that. It's also coming down to us again from traditions to do with the Grim Reaper, and the idea of memento mori, or that the reminder of death ever present, and so on, as a force greater perhaps than just an individual spirit or ghost like a Marley.
Yeah, if you watch the movies and read the books, it almost kind of does feel like a Grim Reaper, right? Do you think that's the impression Dickens was trying to give with this, or is
I
that
think
just
I think that figure very much influences the representation of the ghost of Christmas yet to come, and is consistent with the fact that we go to the graveyard. We Scrooge encounters his own grave, the power of reading that inscription. Yeah, so again, kind of as we were discussing at the beginning, Dickens is influenced by folklore and myth in his own writing, but kind of revises it for his own reading public.
and Dickens really has a way of making you think when you read these or watch the movies too. Like you just mentioned, like seeing your own grave, right? Like that psychology kind of can play at people a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. There's a powerful psychological depth here.
Now we've broken down the spirits. I'm curious what you think if Dickens were to write the story today in the modern era. Do you think his writing would look a little bit different based on how society is today, or do you think that his mindset would kind of still go in the same direction?
I think it would probably persist in many ways in a similar fashion. And I'm thinking about the far reach of Dickens' works, but of A Christmas Carol in particular. And as I was mentioning to some students recently when I was talking about A Christmas Carol with them, we know the various adaptations, that are called either Scrooge or Christmas Carol and so on, right down to the Muppets and Mickey's Christmas Carol and so on. But we can think of others too, like the Grinch, for instance, and even It's a Wonderful Life, that mid-century American film so popular still at Christmas, that certainly bears the influence of A Christmas Carol. And you can see in that film, for instance, so we're into the 1940s now, we're getting closer to our current day, how so many of the kind of the interactions and the structuring of that film are similar, including the encounter with grave sites, the revisiting of the past, and the influence of the past or changes to the past on the present. So I think that the sort of fundamental um, encounter with the self would remain.
Now, there are certain Christmas stories, or for that matter, stories that were written a long time ago that go on for years to come. They kind of last. Why do you think Dickens' A Christmas Carol has that lasting power to go on for so long? Why is that story so popular?
It's a few things. I mean, in part, it's Dickens himself, his ability to create these memorable characters, so many of them across all of his writings, including not only the Christmas stories, but 15 novels. And those characters, Tiny Tim stays with us, Fezziwig stays with us, Scrooge, of course, stays with us. So that ability to create memorable character, but there is something about the essence of the work in its it reminds me of the discussion that Scrooge has with his nephew at the in the opening of the text, where there is this yearning for for equality among people, for the erasure of difference. There's a desire for everyone to capture some kind of joy. And also, what you and I were talking about a little bit earlier about, we all have regrets. We all wish that, some parts of our lives we could do differently. We all kind of wonder, what if? And I think that is the question. What if I could make a change? And it speaks to us, right? It kind of culturally, this persists in the idea of the New Year's resolution, that there's always hope at Christmas time for change, for some kind of improvement, for progress, and that tapped into the Victorian ideal, I think, and it's in individuals' hearts, and so it persists.
Now, for people who may have seen a Christmas Carol movies, Scrooge movies, but not read the text, is there much of a difference? Do you think, or is it kind of still stay kind of in the same path?
Yeah, I find, in all the adaptations I've seen, even parts are left out. Some, the differences and accommodations have to be made when we're compressing a text like this. But somehow, to me, even when my children were young and were watching the Mickey version, the essence somehow seems to remain. That movement from isolation, Scrooge alone, shut up in his counting house, um, the potential suffering ongoing of the Cratchits and so on. Everything is dark, and then there is this movement into light. And so that general trajectory, that movement from despair to hope, seems to me to inform almost all of the adaptations that persist. And we're going to have a new one yet again next year with Johnny Depp. So we'll see.
Oh wow, I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
I'll get
yeah,
my brother right on that one. He'll put that on his list, I'm sure.
yeah.
Now you represent the Dickens Society. Can you tell us a little bit about your role there and what that
Yeah.
society does?
Yeah, sure. So since I said my first visit to the or participation in one of the society's conferences, our annual symposium was in 2012, and then I had a role as society secretary, and then have just commenced my role as vice president, and then in 3 years' time I will become president of the Dickens Society, which is a fantastic honor. For me, and really our work, we are largely comprised of academics, university and college professors, faculty, scholars, but not exclusively. And one of the things that really drew me to the society when I started attending was its openness to younger scholars, for sure, but also to members of the public, who have a love for Dickens, and so many who attend the symposium regularly, who have read all of his works, who probably know more details than I do, because they are so dedicated. And so we work to promote scholarship and the reading and the public's knowledge of Dickens, and to preserve and to contribute to ongoing understanding of his contributions to society, and who he was. Through his writing and through his public performance and other things, and so it's a kind of a great joy to continue to be involved in a society like this, and it is open to anyone who would like to be involved.
So if people want to join the Dickens Society, how do they go about doing that? What steps should they take?
Pretty simple. Just visit dickenssociety.org. And actually, let me see, I have one here. What you in fact do, and it's easy to do on the website, you subscribe to the Dickens Quarterly, is our publication, and you will receive that 4 times a year, and in so doing, you will become a member. And then we have our annual symposium, but we have other events, including coming up on the anniversary of Dickens' birthday, February 7th. We have an online event to celebrate that with some papers and good discussion about Dickens' works. So some of the new activities, more online activity, helps us reach more people who can't necessarily always travel. But the symposium happens annually, but moves back and forth across the Atlantic. So most recently was in Boston. 2023, I had the pleasure of being rerouted from Newark and flying into Syracuse and having to take a taxi to Rochester, where it was being held at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And then coming up this year, our symposium will be in Denmark. So we actually have membership in over 20 countries around the world, and upwards of 300 members at the moment.
That's amazing, and
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ask you how much that taxi ride cost. I can only imagine.
Yeah,
You're
it was wild, but like air, how airplane travel is now, so it was just like you just have to keep going.
Yeah, and you're just happy to get there when it's all said
I
and
was.
done.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you're an author too, right? In your own right. Can you tell us about some of your works?
Yeah, sure. My first book was in large part inspired by many of Dickens' novels, but was on the Victorian period, Dickens and other authors as well, such as Robert Louis Stevenson, Thomas Hardy, and others from the Victorian period. But I was looking at the role, in fact, and this is where Scrooge comes in a little bit, the financial institutions and especially financial fraud, the representation of that in their works played a role in what they were writing about. And now I'm at work with a colleague from the University of Florida on a book on reading Dickens today, to examine some of the questions you've raised as to why the ongoing relevance and interest in Dickens works. Why does that persist? So we're trying to answer that question.
All right, I showed my vulnerability earlier. It's your turn. Which spirit do you think is the spookiest of all?
I don't like Marley. He pops up.
He sets the tone.
Yeah. He really sets the tone, and that's the beginning of the tale. Marley was dead. It's such a contrast to David Copperfield, Dickens' probably most biographical novel, which begins "I am born," and it's not a good news story, it seems, from the get-go. And so when Marley comes in, I'm as unhinged usually as Scrooge.
All right, Dr. Sarah Moulton from St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as well as representing the Dickens Society. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much.
Download the WSYR Plus app on your TV to stream News Channel 9 for free. Just go to your smart TV, search WSYR Plus in the App Store, and download to start streaming today.